Hi, my name is Carla. I'm 17 years old, and after my parents passed, I lived with my older sister Stacy and her husband. My parents passed 2 years ago. They died in a terrible car crash on their way back from a business trip in a neighboring town. They co-owned a big corporate business they ran together, and they had really gone on to make names for themselves. I was devastated when I heard the news. My relationship with my parents wasn't like most teenagers. Other teenagers fought and squabbled with their parents at every opportunity. Me? I had a different life. Both my parents were two of my best, if not my best friends. We went out to the movies and to restaurants together. We played and had fun like a regular bunch of teenage friends. Of course, they were stern when they needed to be, but every time they were, I knew that I was in the wrong. So, you can imagine how devastating it was to hear the news on television one night that the two business moguls, who were my parents, had died in a terrible car accident on their way back from a business trip. My best friends were gone. My sister Stacy already moved out of the house a long time ago. It had just been my parents and I for so many years. And it was so amazing how they had managed to take time out for me, even though they were so busy. The news hit me so hard, I sank into depression. The lively, happy Carla that everyone knew had disappeared. In her place was only someone who looked like her. As time went on, I grew worse and worse. I started to withdraw completely from my friends, and I refused to speak to anyone. I came to school in the mornings with swollen eyes, swollen from crying all night and hardly getting any sleep. My sister was crushed. She loved my parents too, but she knew she didn't have the type of relationship with them that I had, and seeing me so sullen filled her heart with pain. She had tried all she could, but nothing was working. She had brought counselors, therapists, and even psychics to help me with my grief, but there was nothing they could do. I just couldn't get better. As the months passed, I sank deeper and deeper into my depression. I was now so alone. I turned to destructive habits for company. It all started with buying drugs from a man who sold them on the corner of the street where I lived with my sister. When I realized they had a way of getting me happy, even for a short time, I couldn't stop. I kept buying them until I became such a wreck. Soon enough, I started on alcohol and smoking, looking for anything at all that could get me as happy as the drugs did. By now, I was so invested in it, I couldn't stop. This continued for a while, and by now, everyone in school knew the kind of life I lived. I came to school every day either drunk or under the influence of some drug, and by now, that was what everyone had come to expect of me. My sister was embarrassed every time the school authorities called her to come pick me up after making a scene, and that happened almost every day. I was worse than a shadow of myself, and deep down, I knew I had let this depression go too far, but I just couldn't bring myself to stop. I couldn't find my way back. I was too far gone. One day, I went back home to my sister's house early from school after the principal annoyed me. He had called me into his office, giving me a last warning after I slammed a basketball in my gym teacher's face for correcting me, leaving his face seriously swollen. "If you throw another fit at the teachers or anyone else, you will be expelled," he said. "We've accommodated this nonsense long enough. You're not the first person to lose their parents. Get a grip on yourself." I was filled with rage. And maybe it was because, deep down, I knew that what the principal said was true. Maybe it was because, deep down, the truth he had blurted out so bluntly had stung me. I stormed out of the principal's office and slammed the door so hard I distracted the whole school from learning for a moment. "You can send me out of your stupid school for all I care," I said, well out of hearing distance. I didn't really want to be expelled. It would break Stacy's heart. And I knew it wouldn't have been what my parents wanted. I marched home and pulled a cigarette stick from my backpack as I left the school premises. Those idiots! Who needs them anyway? I marched on until I reached my sister's house, but I totally wasn't ready for what I saw next. My sister's husband was home. He obviously wasn't expecting me back home that early, but it was just noon. I froze in my steps as I saw him. My brother-in-law was nearly butt naked on the couch, and scattered all around him were empty containers of used drugs. Used needles littered the floor and the center table, and I couldn't believe my eyes at what I saw. My sister's husband used drugs too? When did he start? That explained why he rarely said anything every time Stacy tried to correct me. He would look at me but not say anything. At first, I thought he was just staying out of what he considered not to be his business. I couldn't think straight after realizing this. Eventually, I got myself together and walked away to my room, looking away from him. All kinds of thoughts flooded my head all at once. Was I going to tell Stacy what I just saw? What if she left him? What if he was only battling with something terrible like I was, and the drugs were his only way of escape? No, I'm not going to be sympathetic. This could come back and haunt me and my sister later. It was decided. I couldn't wait for Stacy to get back from work. I had to tell her. As I was upstairs in my room waiting for her husband came knocking on my door. My heart pounded. "Go away," I said. "I don't want to see you." "I can explain," he said. "Please, don't tell Stacy. I used to be unable to quit drugs before I met your sister, and when she found out, she said she couldn't be with me if I didn't stop. I pleaded with her to stay, that I would try my best because I really loved her, and eventually she helped me through rehab. I was free until you came along with your drugs, alcohol, and smoking. Then all of a sudden, I found myself craving to use drugs again. I battled it for so long, but 3 days ago, I couldn't take it anymore. Please don't tell Stacy. This could be our little secret. See, I brought some new drugs for you to try out. Come on, you'll love it." Now I was offended. There I was, trying to get free, and Stacy's husband was trying to take me deeper in. Any thoughts of covering up for him immediately disappeared. When Stacy got back, I told her what I had seen. I told her I had seen her husband nearly butt naked, surrounded by empty containers of drugs and used needles. I told her that her husband had been using drugs. Stacy shot one look at her husband, begging him to deny it, and when he didn't, she exploded in a rage. Stacy was so mad and upset. I had never seen her like that before. She was screaming, crying, and yelling so hard. I knew by then neighbors already heard and knew what was going on. I walked up to her and tried to hug her to calm her down. "I'm sorry," her husband said, begging and crying on his knees. My sister wasn't having it. "Leave my house," she said. By now, tears were already forming in my own eyes. I knew the right thing to do was to tell my sister, but I didn't want her to lose her marriage. What if I had caught him cheating or doing something much worse? What would she do then? Right there, I knew that I could never tell my sister that he had offered me some of his drugs to bribe me. She would never forgive him. I started to feel very guilty for what I had done. I only imagined that my sister would make him go seek help or something, not send him away completely. It probably hurt her more because she thought he was already done with drugs for good. But still, a pang of guilt flowed over me, especially because he said I had been the trigger that took him back. I didn't know what came over me. Suddenly, I started to beg my sister with tears in my eyes to give him another chance. Somehow, all of this made me realize how much pain I had caused all the other people in my life in the last 2 years. My friends, my sister, and now her husband. I was secretly begging for another chance for myself, to make things right, to try to repair all the damage I had done to everyone around me. Stacy looked at me beg so passionately, and compassion filled her eyes. She told her husband to leave, but that he could come back once he had sought help. I sighed deeply and hugged her, tears flowing down my face. This was a second chance for me too, and we would have to have our secret after all. Stacy must never find out that her husband offered me drugs, or else their marriage would be over. A few months have passed, and now I'm back to being the old Carla again. Stacy's husband too is doing great, and he's almost ready to be back at the house. Pretty soon, we'll be one big happy family.